The next up on our Pokemon team journey is Fruits Basket, the adorable, heart-melting romance manga that got an anime reboot on Crunchyroll in 2019. # not sponsored. This series' original anime was one of the first anime I watched right after Pokemon, and their manga was the first one I read. Thank you, high school library! The characters I'll be giving Pokemon teams to this time will be all the members of the Zodiac, Toru, Uo, and Hana. I should also warn you that these entries will have spoilers. Big spoilers. First up is the precious cinnamon roll main character herself, Toru Honda. Toru's whole thing throughout the story is learning to understand the members of the Soma family while also learning to better understand herself. She's a very kind and nurturing person who has a boundless capacity for love, empathy, and acceptance. She is also the most normal member of the cast while being surrounded by people that are more than a little out there. The first pick is rather obvious, Blissey. Like I said, Toru is a very kind and empathetic person who is always thinking of others before herself, sometimes to her detriment. She has also shown an inability to ignore when someone is in pain, physically or emotionally. Next up is Mincino. When Toru first starts living with the Somas after a few unfortunate events that will take way too long to explain here, she decides to do the housework in exchange for her room. So having a Pokemon like Mincino, a Pokemon well known for using its tail to clean places, is perfect for her. Next up is Indeedee, specifically the female one. Indeedee's Pokedex entries talk about how Indeedee diligently serve people in Pokemon and that the females in particular are very good with children. This makes me think of Toru not only in how she goes out of her way to help others, but also in how she forms a bond with Kisa and becomes an older sister figure for her. I swear, these two are too cute. Next up is Togetic. This is because of the vast number of entries I found that talk about it approaching kind-hearted people or people who are pure of heart in order to bring them happiness. And if there is one person that would be able to attract a Togetic, it would be Toru. Next up is Aboliver. Its Pokedex entry in Scarlet talks about how it's a kind-hearted Pokemon that shares its aromatic and nutrient-filled oil with others. But it is also a reference to the garden that Toru tends to with Yuki. And finally is Pyroar. This Pokemon is a reference to Toru's eventual sweetheart, Kyo. Kyo is a character that has a lot of trouble expressing how he feels and can come off as mean and bad-tempered because of, no nice way to put this, child neglect and abuse. But he is also shown to be steadfastly loyal and will not hesitate to throw hands if it means protecting someone he cares about. Meanwhile, Pyroar is a Pokemon that can appear lazy, but to quote the Dex, will protect its friends with no regard for its own safety. Now we have the first member of the Soma family, Yuki. Yuki is the heartthrob of basically the entire school. However, he's also a character that was used as a bargaining chip by his own parents in order to gain more social standing both in and out of the family. When he wasn't being emotionally and mentally abused by Akito, he was being neglected by his parents and brother. It wasn't until Toru entered their world and began to shake it up that he found the strength to truly break away. He is also the rat of the Zodiac, and the thing with all the members of the Zodiac is that they attract the animal that they transform into. Therefore, Yuki will be having a team made up of rodents. First up is Rattata. I mean, come on, how can it not? It is the rat Pokemon. Next up is Shroodle, and side note, am I the only one that thought that its teeth were a tongue? Anyway, according to its Scarlet entry, Shroodle is normally docile but will bite if angered. Kind of like how Yuki is normally rather calm and collected, but will not hesitate to knock Kyo on his butt when he throws the first punch or pisses him off. Next up is Minun. This Pokemon is here for two reasons. First being that it's a reference to the Prince Yuki fan club. I considered giving Yuki both Minun and Plusle to represent the group, but I eventually decided against it, and the other reason is, I just really like the idea of Yuki having a cute little electric mouse cheering him on whenever he's upset. Next up is Mimikyu. Yes, I know it's not technically a rodent, but it's pretending to be one, so it counts. It's also kind of perfect. in a really sad way. Early in the story of Fruits Basket, Yuki talks to Toru about how he only acts nice because he wants to be accepted. And what does Mimikyu do? Disguises itself as a Pikachu in an attempt to gain acceptance. Next up is Pichu. This is partly because it's another mouse and I don't want to give Yuki Pikachu. It's also because its dex entries talk about how Pichu will often hurt itself because it can't control its electricity. And that made me think of Yuki's medical condition and how it caused him to have a lot of asthma attacks when he was little. And finally, we have Mousehold, specifically the family of 3. This is a reference to the family that he eventually gets to have with his sweetheart Machi. It especially works because they have one kid, their son Mutsuki. Now we come to the main love interest and third main character, Kyo. The outcast of the Zodiacs, the hothead of the cast, and the one that needs the most hugs. Kyo is the character who was dealt the worst hand in the series, and the one that you are most rooting for to get a happy ending alongside Toru. He is the cat of the Zodiac, and as such, I'm going to be giving him a team of cats, with one important exception. First up is Lipard. This Pokemon's dex entries talk about how it has a habit of disappearing and reappearing unexpectedly, and about how its body is solid muscle. This makes me think of the start of the anime when Kyo suddenly shows up at Shigure's house to fight Yuki after months of training in the mountains. It's also implied that this has happened more than once. Next up is Meowstic. Specifically the male one, as the females are described as selfish and aggressive. Now, while Kyo can be aggressive, he is not selfish. The males are also described as being the more protective of the two, and they will go all out to protect their partner. I think that fits Kyo well. Next up is Persian. This Pokemon's dex entries talk about how it's got a very bad temper and often lashes out. And yeah, that fits Kyo to a T. At least in the first half of the story, where the poor guy hasn't dealt with any of his childhood trauma yet. Next up is Litten. This kitty just screams Kyo. It's a Pokemon that doesn't show its emotions easily, and earning its trust takes time, like Kyo. The Litten from the anime also reminds me of Kyo, with it having a father figure that it learns to fight from. Next up is Umbreon. This Pokemon is here not for any of its dex entries, but because of the event in which Toru sees the true form of the Cat Zodiac. This event takes place at night, and it involves Toru reaching out to Kyo and convincing him to come home, allowing him to finally start healing from all of his trauma. And finally, we have Ordino, representing Toru. Ordino is Gen 5's version of the Chansey line, and all of its dex entries talk about how it's kind-hearted and uses its feelers to check people in Pokemon's conditions. That and how good its hearing is. Shigure is the dog Zodiac and resident adult, heavy air quotes, of the house. He is the primary support character and the one that has to constantly deal with the antics of the rest of the cast wrecking his house. Once again, his team will be made up of Pokemon matching his Zodiac. First up is Houndoom. This is because it is the dog Pokemon that most resembles Shigure's own dog form of a sleek black dog. But its dex entries talking about its howling also reminded me of the first instance of foreshadowing in the show towards the Soma curse and what animal Shigure is, since it's hearing the howl of a wild dog that tells him that there's been a landslide. Next up is Growlithe. Growlithe's dex entries talk about how it's protective of its territory and how it's loyal. Shigure may be a little twisted at times, but he is most certainly both of those things. Staying true to a love that he's had ever since he was a preteen and constantly bringing up how often people keep trashing his house. He also is the resident adult of the main group, though I hesitate to call him responsible. Next up is Stoutland. This is because, again, it is considered a loyal Pokemon. However, it is also considered highly intelligent. It's also mentioned several times that Stoutland rescues people in the mountains and that they are often trusted to babysit. Kind of like how Shigure is trusted to be responsible for Toru, Kyo, and Yuki, and how he and Yuki saved Toru after finding her living in a tent in the mountainous area near his house. Next up is Zorua. This is for a very simple reason. They are both absolute trolls. Seriously, watch any episode or read any chapter where Shigure's editor Miki makes an appearance and you'll see what I mean. Next up is Dusk Lycanroc. This is for a very similar reason as to why I gave one to Twilight previously. And it's because of the duality of the personality of both the Pokemon and the potential trainer. Shigure is a character that is super confusing and it's hard to get a real read on him for most of the story. One moment he's a responsible immature guardian, the next he's acting like a whiny brat, and the next he's being a manipulator so skilled it's actually scary. And finally, we have Grievard. This is, again, because of all the references to how loyal it is. But I also can't help but think that this little pup is also the kind of image Shigure wants to project. Kagura is the first Soma outside of the initial three to be introduced to Toru. She is one of the love rivals, in the Kyo-Toru love story and has something of a split personality. She is also an unfortunate example of a trope and double standard that has always annoyed me, at least when she first shows up. Thankfully, that stops showing up later in the series. She's also the boar of the Zodiac, so her team is going to be made up of pigs. And now I'm beginning to regret this theming thing. First up is Embor. Part of this is because of its name literally having boar in it, but it also being a fiery pig with a deep care for its friends just screams Kagura to me. You need not look any further than the girl's mood swing personality for an example of that. Next up is Spoink. This is because it's one of the cuter pig Pokemon, and I think Kagura would prefer to have a cute Pokemon. Next up is Mamoswine. Because out of all the pig Pokemon there are, I think this one best represents Kagura's physical strength. This behemoth looks like it could demolish a building if it wanted. And every time Kagura visits Shigure's home, at least one door gets broken. Next up is Oinkologne. Again, it's one of the only pigs in Pokemon, but the females are also noted as having strong muscles that allow them to jump 16 feet, and Kagura has jumped across entire rooms to get to Kyo. Next up is Primeape, because while yes, it's mostly an ape, it's still got some pig in it, so it counts. But also, I don't think you could get a better representation of Kagura's short fuse and violent outbursts. And with that, I am officially out of pig Pokemon to give her. So instead, let's give her a cat Pokemon to represent her feelings for Kyo. In this particular case, I'm going to give her Luxray. This is because it gives off a kind of serious dark aura and its ability to see through solid objects. Which makes me think of how Kagura's feelings for Kyo started off as a lie, as an attempt to ease her own guilty conscience over certain events that will take too long to explain. And how Kyo refuses to even entertain the idea of being with her because he could see right through her. Momiji is the next Soma to be introduced to Toru, not that she knows it when they first meet. This little baby-faced troublemaker is the other love rival alongside Kagura. However, unlike Kagura, he never actually tells Toru how he feels, recognizing Toru's feelings for Kyo and just wanting Toru to be happy. This poor guy has one of the more heart-wrenching backstories in the series. And this is the series where everyone needs some flipping therapy. Once again, member of the Zodiac, Pokemon will match his animal. This time, it's Wabbits. Okay, I'm gonna level with you all. Half of this list is just because the Pokemon is or looks like a rabbit and has nothing to do with the Pokemon's personality. And that is because the Pokedex entries mention nothing about the Pokemon's general personality and only their abilities. Our first Pokemon, Cinderace, however, is thankfully one of the ones that do match up with Momiji. Primarily the tidbit about Cinderace having a habit of showboating and getting itself in trouble as a result. And yeah, Momiji has done that. More than once. Though I'm really disappointed that I couldn't find any rabbits that reflect his tendency to use his childlike appearance at the start of the series to get away with stuff. Our next Pokemon is Azumarill. This Pokemon is here because its Dex entries mention how Azumarill has really good hearing. Which made me remember how Momiji is often the one overhearing conversations between adults at the Soma family estate. Seriously, this kid overhears so much and is often the one with the information that the rest of the cast needs. Next up is Baneri, and this is purely here because of Dawn's Baneri in the anime. A cute little love-struck rabbit that is constantly trying to get their crush's attention. Only in Momiji's case, he's using his cute face and childlike personality to make Toru drop her guard around him. And the rest of these picks are purely because they're rabbits and I think they fit Momiji's "I'm so cute and innocent" act. Wigglytuff, Bunnelby, and Nidoran male. 29 species of rabbit and only half a dozen lines in the Pokemon world. Hattori is introduced to Toru at the same time Momiji is properly introduced to her. He's not only the resident doctor of the Zodiac members, he's also one of the members that came the closest to happiness before it was taken away from him. He also has the power to erase memories. A power that is never explained. Hattori is the dragon of the Zodiac, and while in the story this translates to him being a seahorse, in the Pokemon world, we can give him some actual dragons. The first one is going to be super obvious. It's Kingdra, the original seahorse dragon Pokemon. Even though Skrelp and its evolution look more like Hattori's transformed form, its dex entries all talk about how it sinks ships, which is pretty counter to the Doctor's own personality. Next up is Sliggoo, specifically the Hisuian form. This is because of the Dex entry describing this little dragon as being given to melancholy. That also describes Hattori pretty well at the start of his appearance in the story, which, after you find out his backstory, makes a really heartbreaking amount of sense. Next up is Altaria, who I'm putting here to represent Hattori's lost love, Hana. Altaria is not only a dragon, but a soft, fluffy, affectionate bird. Its wings also make me think of the riddle that Hana had given to Hattori on their first meeting to break the ice. Next up is Gabite, and this is solely for the Dex entries that talk about its scales being used in medicine. Considering what other things are being used for medicine and food in the Pokemon world, I completely buy this. So, I can easily see the Dragon Doctor keeping a Gabite on hand for when he needs a few scales. Next up is Baxcalibur. This is for two reasons. One, like Altaria, it also reminds me of Hana's riddle, and two, with this being an ice type, I can see it having a rather chilly personality, much like how Hattori seems to at first. He acts cold and aloof because he's afraid of letting anyone close lest they end up like Hana. And finally is Applin. This guy is here purely for the joke, and if you didn't see that coming, hi, I'm Rude. I'm a dork and I have a soft spot for puns and bad jokes. Haru is introduced to Toru shortly after New Year's and has one of the funniest introductions in the series. While the guy is usually laid back, he is also a massive lover of martial arts and shows up because he wants to challenge Kyo to a fight. He's also got a terrible sense of direction, taking him 3 days to find his way from the family house to the road near the school where the main trio go. And, like Kagura, Haru also has a split personality. Except, unlike her, his is actually serious enough that his two halves have their own nicknames, those being White Haru and Black Haru. And this entry I'm going to need to make a few stretches for because this guy is the cow/ox. First up is Miltank. As much as I do not like this Pokemon, it's sadly one of the only cow Pokemon there is, so it gets a spot on the team. Next up is Cantonian Tauros. This is here because 1, male cow, and 2, this thing's temper makes me think of Black Haru, Haru's dark, hot-headed, foul-mouthed, and just plain rude side. Not only in the temper, but also in the tendency to violence when Black Haru comes out. Seriously, don't piss this guy off. Next up is Paldea Tauros, specifically the combat breed. Why combat breed? Because Haru, like Yuki and Kyo, was also trained in martial arts. Also, there's a line in the Pokédex that says that combat breeds use their horns to strike out weak points in an opponent. And while Haru doesn't do this physically, he does do it verbally when he's first introduced and turns into Black Haru, implying to Kyo that he's going to do not PG things to Toru. Next up is Buffalant. Remember how I said there'd be stretches on this list? Here's one of them. It's a bison, which is kind of like a cow/ox if you squint your eyes and tilt your head. But it's also another Pokemon with a temper, so here we go. Next up is Absol. Yet another stretch. But this one actually has a reason for it being here. Absol's head straight up looks like a yin-yang symbol, which is what the nicknames of Haru's two sides come from. It's also a Pokemon that is able to sense when danger of disaster is about to happen, and while that isn't a power of Haru's, he's often ending up involved when something bad happens to one of the family. Like when Kisa runs away, or Rin is going through everything she has to go through. Speaking of Rin, that brings us to our last Pokemon, Zebstrika. This is because Rin and Haru are in a secret relationship for an unknown amount of time during the story, before Rin breaks up with him to protect him from Akito after she's hospitalized from being thrown out a window. I picked Zebstrika because it's one of the only horse or horse-like Pokemon there are. It's predominantly black, like Rin's animal form, and it's described as being aggressive and volatile in the Paldean Pokedex. Surprisingly enough, the next member of the Zodiac to be introduced to Toru is the member that represents God. Not only that, but it's the character that acts as the main antagonist for most of the story, only to turn out to be the person that is in most need of some flipping therapy. This girl, remember I said there'd be spoilers, is the result of extreme child abuse. As this character is meant to represent a literal god, I think I'm completely justified in giving this girl a team of legendaries. Because, seriously, how else would I be able to do this? The first Pokemon on our list is one of the newest legendaries, and one that absolutely screams Akito to me. Pecharunt, a little legendary Pokemon that controls others with poisoned mochi. But isn't evil just a literal child starved for attention and is willing to do anything to get and keep it? Yeah, this little guy couldn't scream Akito any louder if you gave them a megaphone. Next up is Arceus. You can't have the individual that is meant to represent God from the Zodiac story and not give them the God Pokemon. Next up is Darkrai. Seriously, these two fit together too well. In the movie Rise of Darkrai, Darkrai is revealed to not be evil, but a victim of prejudice and circumstances, where he was hurt and attacked by everyone, only being shown kindness by one person. And Akito is a child that was forced to live as a boy, was emotionally and psychologically abused by her mother, lost her father at an early age, and grew up believing that everyone will eventually leave her if she doesn't keep them with her by force. What eventually saved her from that mindset? The kindness and acceptance of an outsider who saw her as a person before the god of the Zodiac. Next up, we have Yveltal. Why the Pokemon that is the embodiment of death? 1. The symbolism of how Akito basically killed the happy endings of the other Zodiac members to keep them by her side. 2. Being the death of her father when she was little. And 3rd, in the original anime, they made it that Akito's anger stemmed from the fact that he was destined to die young because he carried the core of the Zodiac curse. This was completely made up for the original anime in order to facilitate the final confrontation at the end of the anime, since the manga was still ongoing at the time. Next up, we have Kyurem, the empty shell of a dragon who is feared by all the people of Lakanosa Town. Rather like how Akito was feared by the members of the Zodiac and a few that are in on the secret. And finally, we have Mewtwo. Mewtwo and not Mew because of the whole anger thing. Much like how Mewtwo attempted to destroy the world in his anger over being used, Akito, near the end of the story, goes on a path of self-destruction, attempting to destroy everything around her as she puts herself in the mindset of, if I'm going to be abandoned, I'll destroy them and everything they hold dear first. The next member of the Zodiac to be introduced to Toru is actually the brother of Yuki, Ayame. This guy is pretty darn flamboyant and a loudmouth. He's also one of the causes for Yuki's own childhood trauma. But unlike their parents, who I really wish I could slap, Ayame is attempting to make amends with Yuki and build a better relationship with him. Watching Ayame realize his mistakes and trying to make up for them is really admirable. Which you'd think would be ironic considering he's the snake, but actually look up the symbolism of snakes all across the world and you'll be surprised. Like with Kogura and Momiji, my options are limited, so please don't kill me if some of these picks don't have much depth to them. First up is Ekans, the original snake Pokemon. No other reason. It doesn't even look like Ayame's snake form. Next up is Superior. This one actually has some depth to it. Superior is a very aloof Pokemon with an air of "do not approach me." This was Ayame's basic personality for a very long time when he was younger. The only ones he let get close to him were his cousins Shigure and Hattori, not because of trust issues, but because he viewed everyone else as unimportant. It wouldn't be until much later in life he would come to regret this mindset and begin trying to mend the damage he caused. Next up is Dratini. Yes, it's a dragon type, but it's also quite serpentine. It's also the only snake-like Pokemon that actually looks anything like Ayame's snake form. Next up is Milotic. This is because of Ayame's profession, which is owning a fabric and clothing store, which also takes commissions for cosplay and adult interests. He is also quite good at it. The yellow outfit that he and his girlfriend Mine had Toru try on is so cute. Now we come to the last two, which are Silicobra and Seviper, which, like with Ekans, are here purely because they're snakes, and in the case of Silicobra, I feel it fits better than its evolution. The next member of the Zodiac to be introduced to Toru is the adorable little bean, Kisa. When Kisa first shows up on the scene, she's become a selective mute due to severe bullying at her school. She becomes quickly attached to Toru due to her understanding what Kisa is going through and why she didn't want to tell anyone. The two quickly form a big sister-little sister relationship that is just so adorable to watch. This cute little bean is the Tiger Zodiac, which means we have another cat team. But if they fit the aesthetic of a tiger, I'll still count it. Though, I gotta ask, why is there both a cat and a tiger in the Zodiac myths? I don't get it. First up is Arcanine, the tiger/dog hybrid. One, because it's honestly the second most tiger-looking Pokemon in the entire franchise, and second, because I think Kisa could have really used a protective and loyal doggo when she was dealing with her bullies. Next up is Torracat, the most tiger-looking Pokemon in the entire franchise. Torracat, and not Incineroar, because 1, I hate Incineroar's design, and 2, Torracat's dex entries talk about how fierce this cat can be while also clinging to its trainer. Kind of like how Kisa bit Toru's hand twice before switching to following her around like a duckling. Next up is Espeon, because along with its ability to use air currents to predict people's movements, its dex entries also talk about how loyal it is. Something that I think describes Kisa quite well with her relationships with those she cares about, especially Toru. Next up is Skitty. It's absolutely adorable like Kisa, it's playful, which I think would help cheer her up after a bad day, and its dex entries for Fire Red, Leaf Green, Heart Gold, and Soul Silver talk about how it's difficult to earn its trust, like Kisa. And finally is Shinx and Sprigatito, because they are cute little baby cats. The next member of the Zodiac to be introduced to Toru is Ritsu. Ritsu is a boy that cross-dresses as a way to ease his anxiety. And when I say this boy has anxiety, I mean this boy really has anxiety. He's always apologizing for everything, terrified of making any kind of mistake, however small, and takes any perceived failure to the extreme. The fact that his one coping mechanism only ever seemed to get him into even more trouble probably didn't help. He's also the monkey zodiac, so monkey team, with one exception. First up is Chimchar, and this is mostly for Paul/Ash's Chimchar from the anime. He was super timid and shy, but was always trying his best for his trainer. Like how Ritsu is constantly struggling with his anxiety, but is also trying to live his life. And I think if these two ever met, it'd be like when Ritsu met Miki for the first time. If you know, you know. Next up is Pansage. This is because of its White X and Omega Ruby entries, all talking about how the leaves on its head relieve stress and tiredness. And seriously, anything to give this guy a break from his anxiety is a win in my book. Next up is Pansia. This is because 1. Ritsu is the son of a hot springs owner, and fire types seem to be drawn to hot springs, and 2. Because of its dex entries for Black and White 2, X and Omega Ruby talking about how it likes to help people, like Ritsu. Next up is a Pom. This is because while it's mischievous and might get Ritsu into even more trouble, it's also stated to be clumsy when not using its tail. And if there's one thing about Ritsu that is made very clear in his very first appearance aside from his anxiety, it's his clumsiness. Next up is Grookey. Again, Ritsu is the son of hot spring owners, so Grookey would be a good fit on 2 fronts. 1, it's a little drummer, so it can act as an entertainer for the guests, and 2, its drumming is said to revitalize plants, so it can help with the gardens at the same time. And finally, we have the exception. Gardevoir, specifically male Gardevoir. This is a reference to Ritsu's cross-dressing habit, but also I think Ritsu would benefit from having a loyal and caring Pokemon like Gardevoir by his side. The next member of the Zodiac is Hiro. This little punk went out to meet Toru specifically to insult her and torment her because he was jealous of how much time Kisa had been spending with her. This kid is one of those characters where I can't make up my mind on if I like him or not. On the one hand, he's a little brat that is constantly saying cruel things to Toru out of jealousy, but on the other hand, he really cares about Kisa and his family and is constantly trying to make them happy. And later in the story, he even starts berating himself whenever he lets his jealousy get the better of him. So, he's really trying. And because Hiro is the sheep/ram and there are literally 2 sheep lines in all of Pokemon, I'm, again, going to need to make exceptions. First up is Wooloo. This is because it is the sheep Pokemon that looks closest to Hiro's own animal form. Next up is Ampharos, and this is for a pretty obscure reason. Hiro's name means light on the path, and what is the job of Amphi the Ampharos in Johto? Being the light for a lighthouse. It fits! And with that, I am all out of sheep Pokemon. So let's continue this with Zangoose. This is because of all the other characters in Fruits Basket, the one that Hiro finds the most irritating is Ayame. So I can totally see him keeping around a Zangoose as a result. Next up, representing his bond with Kisa, is Growlithe. Growlithe and not Arcanine because he is still really immature, more resembling a yappy puppy than a loyal guard dog, but still loyal all the same. Next up is Exu, and this is because of the Pokemon Masters EX costume for Nate, which has him in the Prince costume from Pokestar Studios and gives him Haxorus. This is a reference to the conversation with Toru at the end of his introduction, where he recognizes his shortcomings in his inability to protect Kisa and receives reassurance from Toru, who tells him that one day he will be a valiant prince who can always protect her. And finally, representing Hiro's cunning and vindictiveness is Sneasel. The next member of the Zodiac to be introduced to Toru is Isuzu, also known as Rin, and wow was there a gap between Hiro's introduction and hers. This girl doesn't get much screen time, but boy does she have an impact, especially on her sweetheart Haru. Her whole motivation is to free Haru from the curse so that he can be happy. While she comes off as cold and mean, it's mostly just a shield to protect herself after the abuse she suffered from her parents. The reason she's so standoffish with Toru is half because she doesn't want to get hurt and half because she doesn't want to hurt her. Rin is the horse zodiac, so this team is going to be a pain. Mainly because there are only 3 horse Pokemon lines with 1 regional variant. That's not really a lot. So let's get the first 4 out of the way. The 2 Rapidash lines, Zebstrika and Mudsdale. The Cantonian Rapidash, being known to set people that it doesn't trust on fire if they come too close, is very Rin. Zebstrika because it most resembles Rin's animal form of a black horse. Galarian Rapidash, as it's stated to be prideful and brave, which is certainly the front that Rin likes to put on, and Mudsdale because it's the only other non-legendary horse Pokemon left. After that, the 5th Pokemon is Hydreigon, because its Violet Dex entry talks about how it became bitter and vicious due to being hunted down and viciously attacked in days past. And yeah, that fits Rin. Now, the last Pokemon, I actually had a bit of trouble deciding what to pick, as there are 3 big relationships that Rin has that have a massive impact on her in the story. Do I give her Tepig to represent Kagura, who becomes her adoptive sister after Rin is abandoned by her parents? Do I give her Happiny to represent the bond she forms and slowly develops with Toru, who becomes the mother figure that she always wanted in her life? In the end, I decided to give her Miltank to represent her connection to Haru because literally everything this girl does in the story from the moment of her introduction is done for her man. The last member of the Zodiac to be introduced to Toru is Kurano, who actually first showed up earlier than Isuzu but wasn't introduced to Toru until much later. Kurano first shows up at the workplace of Toru's friend Uo, where he reminds the blood of Toru with his clumsy behaviour. Kurano is the Rooster Zodiac and the first member to break his curse, having broken it before the series even began. But he remains by Akito's side due to his kind heart and sense of duty. This guy's heart is in the right place, but his actions really do more harm than good. First up is Pidgey. This is for the little sparrows that fly away during the scene where Kurano's broken curse is revealed, and also for its Stadium 2 Dex entry in which it's described as being very conflict-averse. Next up is Starly, again because of the little sparrows from the Curseless reveal, but also because of its Dex entries talking about how it's weak and will thus flock together for safety. The Soma family is very big, and the Zodiac members often cluster together due to the issues that their curse can and often does cause. Next up is Delibird, the single least useful bird Pokemon when it comes to battles, but a gimmick that certainly makes him match with Kurano. Delibird's whole thing is that it's a Pokemon with a big heart and gives gifts to others, particularly those in need. And Kurano is also a kind-hearted person whose kindness, much like Delibird's move Present, can have the tendency to blow up in people's faces. Next up is Corviknight. This is the kind of person I think Kurano wants to be. Someone strong and brave who's able to protect those he cares about. But like how Corviknight can't serve as a taxi service in Paldea due to Tinkaton, Kurano can't live his own life or reach his full potential while trapped within the Soma family. Next up is Decidueye. This is because of its Dex entry from Moon, which explains that while Decidueye is normally cool and cautious, it's also prone to panic when caught off guard. It's also a Pokemon that is based on an extinct animal, much like how Kurano is pretending to be a Zodiac even though his curse is broken. And finally, we have Orikoko, specifically the Sensu style. This is because the Sensu style is based on the traditional Japanese fan dance. And it's mentioned during the New Year's episode/chapter that every year the Zodiac members gather for a banquet mirroring the banquet from the Zodiac story. And the Zodiac member whose animal is the New Year's performs a dance. And considering Kurano is pretending to still have the curse, and his curse broke when he was a teenager, I think? He's done the New Year's dance a bunch of times. Now that we've done the Somas, it's time to tackle Toru's two best friends, with the first to get her team being the Yankee with a heart of gold, Arisa Uotani, aka Uo. This girl is Toru's first friend and has one heck of a history. Living in a poor home situation from a young age, she ended up joining a gang in middle school where she heard about Toru's mom and came to idolize her. After meeting her idol and her idol's daughter, she was given a safe space to be herself and be happy, making her realize that she didn't want to be in a gang anymore. She wanted to be someone Toru could be proud to call her friend. So she quit her old gang, and now a few years later she's doing well in school. And while she's still a bit of a hothead and blunt, her home life has significantly improved. Happy for you, girl! If Uo were to have a trainer class, it would be in the roughneck, punk girl, and biker range. So poison, dark, fighting, and fire are the big ones here. First up, we'll be starting with a biker classic with a twist, Galarian Wheezing. Paying homage to her gangster past, Uo's first Pokemon is the biker staple of Wheezing, but to show how much she's grown, it's not the polluting cancer metaphor that is Cantonian Wheezing, but the atmosphere cleaning anti-pollution advertisement that is Galarian Wheezing. Next, representing Uo's fiery temper, is Annihilape. Annihilape and not Primeape because, again, character growth. Next up is Pangoro, because its Pokedex entries talk about how it's got a violent temperament, but it won't put up with bullying. Read or watch any of the scenes where the Prince Yuki fan club are involved and you'll see how that connects to Uo. Next up, representing the whole motorbike part of a gang, is Rivavroom. It's a literal engine. It also helps that this Pokemon was used extensively by Team Star, which is a very PG version of a gang. Next, representing her eventual relationship with Kurano, is Murkrow. This is because A, it's a bird, B, it's a dark type, and C, Murkrow's Dex entries talk about how it's said to bring misfortune. And, well, the Zodiac Curse certainly does that. And even taking the curse out of the equation, Kurano does still end up causing misfortune with his good intentions. And finally, both representing her bond with Toru and the biker from Black and White, we have Togepi. Yes, there was a biker in Black and White that only had one Pokemon, and it was Togepi. And for our last character to get her team, we have Saki Hanajima, aka Hana. Born with the power to hear others' thoughts, Hana had a really rough childhood. Despite having a loving home, it was difficult for her to even step outside of her house because every time she did, she was bombarded by the thoughts of everyone around her. This resulted in Hana becoming incredibly quiet and closed off from everyone outside of her family, including other kids. And that caused children her own age to start bullying her, calling her a witch, and blaming her for anything that goes wrong. After a boy in her elementary school becomes hospitalized after attacking her, the bullying ramps up even further until her parents finally convince her to switch schools for her safety. At her new school is where she meets Toru and Uo, who make it their business to befriend her. Like, completely unprompted and in spite of her telling them that she's dangerous. It's through their unconditional love and acceptance that Hana is finally able to accept herself and eventually get a hold on her powers. With all of that laid out, and considering her general style, I think her trainer class would be a Hex Maniac. So, Psychic and Ghost Pokemon ahoy! First up is Miss Magius. Like I mentioned, Hana was and still is called a witch for her strange powers and her gothic aesthetic. Her powers, much like Miss Magius, can cause headaches, like with the girl that brought up Hana's past without any thought to Hana's own feelings. Cough, karma, cough! Next up is Esper. This is because, like Esper, Hana also couldn't control her powers in her childhood, resulting in her being very withdrawn and quiet. And the first time she let her powers out in a moment of anger and hate, it caused a lot of damage. Much like how Esper keeps its ears folded in order to keep its power in check because of how dangerous it is. Next up is Gothitelle, and this is purely because its aesthetic matches Hana's. Next up is Espeon. This is for the bond that Hana formed with Toru and Uo, because the whole reason that Hana gained control over her powers was the unconditional love and acceptance of her friends. Next up is Mimikyu, partly to keep up with the trend of those closest to Toru getting fairy types on their team, and partly because of everything to do with Mimikyu. The little creature that was blamed for the death of a human and is desperately searching for someone to love it, and the girl that was shunned for her powers and the rumors about her almost killing someone. These two souls have a lot in common. And finally is Sinistea. Again, this is for the aesthetic, and I can just imagine Hana having this little thing around just to mess with the Prince Yuki fan club.